Welcome back to this next hour of Green Mountain Mornings here on WINQ AM Brattleboro. I'm your host, Olga Peters, 9 minutes past the top of the hour. And welcome to my next guest, Randy Holhut from the Commons. Good morning, Randy.
Good morning, Olga. Good morning, everyone. Hi, Joyce.
Hi, Joyce. And I hope after this morning, which has been a little tough in the world, you can tell me about something that is actually working in this country.
Yes, and that was a really inspiring afternoon last Friday at Great River Terrace, the old Lamplighter Motel on Putney Road in Brattleboro, and the celebration of creating 22 new housing units out of this derelict old motel. And not just housing units, but supported housing units. So designed for people who are homeless, long-term homeless, to finally have a place they can call their own and have the support they need to get back on their feet and get ready to face the world.
Yes, and I was looking at some of your photos in the Commons as well as some of the photos that went up on Facebook, and it's a really beautiful site. The apartments, while considered micro apartments, are really beautiful and open and nice light and all those wonderful things that we all want in housing.
Well, it's a simple principle of that just because you're living in poverty doesn't mean you don't deserve to have something nice in your life.
Yeah.
And, it's the same principle that Dorothy Day, the woman who founded the Catholic Worker, and the Catholic Worker houses used to serve meals to her clients on China with silverware. Mm-hmm. Figuring that her theory was that they're no less deserving of being treated with dignity than anyone else.
Right.
And that was the thing of dignity and compassion were the overriding themes, and contrasting that with the lack of dignity and the lack of compassion on the Mexican border. Mm-hmm. And it was really pointed. Just about every speaker kind of referenced that. If I can't think of a better rebuke to our president than what I saw on Friday, that a group of people got together, recognized the problem, did something about it.
And did something useful about it. Let's be very clear about that.
Yes, because this model is starting to catch on. The idea that you want to solve the problem of homelessness, give people homes.
Right.
And don't just give them homes, also give them the support. So this is how Groundworks and CRS are working together to provide the services. The main building in the middle of the two wings of the hotel that got built as part of the renovations is going to be a community house kind of thing.
Yes.
That where there'll be offices to meet with the various social workers, but also community rooms for to have potlucks and celebrations and whatnots. It's kind of the alternate living room for everybody.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because one thing Josh Davis from Groundworks and I have talked about when it comes to rehousing people who have been homeless for quite a while is, when you don't have a lot of resources, relationships become your primary currency. And if you have been chronically homeless, you quite often have a network of people that you rely on. And to take someone who has been relying on a very deep community for your everyday and suddenly isolate them in housing can be hard for people. And Josh was saying one thing he likes about Great River is that it kind of strikes a balance that if you want to be alone, because some people do, you've got your apartment. But if you want community, there is that main room, there's the outside space, there is a place to still have community.
Yeah, the green space in the back is nice, too, besides the community house. But, it's considering it's on Putney Road, and, the interstate's behind you, a very busy road in front of you, and Chinese food.
Very good Chinese food.
But it's a really nice place, and like anything that the the Housing Trust does, it's done right.
Mm-hmm.
And this was Connie Snow's last major project before she retired as executive director, and it's a nice way to go out.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Connie Snow. Did they dedicate it to anyone, or?
No, it's no. Her Connie's monument, I guess, will be coming in later this year or next year when they finish the snow block on.
Oh, that's right.
On Flat Street.
Yep, another intriguing, interesting project. I can't wait to see. Randy and I have to go to break, but we shall return shortly, so stay tuned. We are back, and this is Green Mountain Mornings here on 100.3 FM, AM 1490. I'm your host, Olga Peters, 23 minutes past the top of the hour. And hello, Randy Holhut from the Commons.
Hello again, Ms. Olga Peters.
I want to remind listeners that this segment of Green Mountain Mornings is being filmed by BCTV, and it will be rebroadcast on air on their TV station later, and on their Facebook page and online and all these wonderful places. Rebroadcast of Green Mountain Mornings tonight is sponsored by Brattleboro Savings and Loan. Hey, Randy.
Yeah?
Are you getting ready for the primaries?
Oh, yeah, I'm totally stoked. Because I guess today is the day.
Today is the day that early voting begins. Technically, it's June 30th, but since that falls on a weekend, it bumps it over to the Friday.
Well, you get an extra day.
Right, see?
So yes. Happy early voting day, everyone. But seriously, it's a good idea because, I mean, in the middle of August, the last thing you're thinking about is voting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think it was a totally bogus idea to move the primary into August. As it was, Vermont was an anomaly by having its primaries in September.
Right.
and having, barely 8 weeks between the primary and the general election.
Was that one of the reasons they moved it to August? I don't remember what was the thought.
Well, the reason they moved it to August was to supposedly give the troops overseas a chance to send in their absentee ballots.
Oh, that's right.
But I think the real reason was when it comes to the Republican Party, and sometimes Democrats do this, but most often it's Republicans, the default position is drive down turnout and have as few people as possible vote. And what could have a lower turnout than a primary in the middle of August?
I was reading on the Pew Charitable Trust yesterday a number of their recent studies, and one thing they pointed out was that while Gen Xers and Gen Yers and the Millenniums make up the majority of the voting body, they are also the three generations that are least likely to turn out and vote.
Yes, and the people who do turn out to vote are the older generations. Mm-hmm. And they will vote come hell or high water because they've figured out to get what you want, you've got to show up.
Yeah.
And
this is true.
And certainly in the 2010 and 2014 midterm elections, the Obama voters didn't show up for those elections, and what we got was arguably the worst Congress in the history of the United States. We got a Republican majority that's doing what you expect a Republican majority to do.
Yeah.
So here in Vermont, where the specter of Koch money is Koch brother money is kind of hovering to the outside, waiting to rush in at the first possible opening. We had the budget debate kind of peter out and fizzle out. Mm-hmm. With no one particularly happy, but
right.
All the candidates are going to be coming to Brattleboro next Friday for the citizens' breakfast.
Yes, and I don't know that Phil Scott has confirmed, but James Ellers, Christine Hulquist, Sonborn, whose first name is Brandon?
Ethan.
Ethan, thank you. Sorry about that. And Brent DeSiegel.
The
have all
hometown girl.
confirmed. The hometown girl. They have all confirmed that they will be there.
Yeah, this is pretty much the Democrats. Phil doesn't need to be down here. I think he needs a map to find Brattleboro sometimes. For all the times he gets down to Brattleboro.
It's easy. You just follow 91. If you hit the Mass border, turn around. You went too far.
Or stop at Hillside Pizza in Berniston and then come back.
Oh, yeah. Okay, there's always that.
Or Antonio's. Or the Clover.
Oh, the Clover. Yum. Love the Clover. But we digress.
Yeah, so I think Phil might end up going down there and then coming back. So they asked at Brattleboro.
And then be like, oh, there it is. I forgot. I thought I was in Vermontachusets.
But I see one of the candidates, Emily Kornheiser, is making today a real holiday by having the kind of party tied around the early voting.
Yes. Yeah, she calls it an action festival. It's happening this afternoon on the town common, and there will be food and music, but there will also be a number of local organizations, primarily, I think she said local activist organizations, who will be tabling and talking to people, and her hope is that it will help people who maybe haven't been engaging in any type of volunteerism or political organizing will get involved. Because that's one of the big things of her campaign is I want more people engaged in the local community.
Well, it's a good way to get out the vote without making it look totally self-serving.
That's true.
So, piggybacking on community activism is a smart idea.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a rare opportunity we'll get Friday, provided everyone shows up to see the four Democratic candidates.
Right, on the 6th.
It's the dynamics of that race are very interesting. And I don't think people have been really paying close attention to it yet. But given how Phil Scott's last few months in offices have gone, one of those people are going to be your next governor.
I think you might be right. I know there's a lot of folks who are saying it's really hard for an incumbent in Vermont to get knocked off their pedestal. But 2 legislative sessions in a row where he has kind of pulled this fast one at the end and created a standoff over things like the budget and education spending, I think has worn very thin with a lot of people.
Yes. Vermont politics doesn't roll that way, and I think trying to inject the kind of politics we see in other places like Wisconsin, the bad Wisconsin, not the good Wisconsin, the Scott Walker Wisconsin.
The evil twin Wisconsin.
Well, the Coke subsidiary of the Coke Industries, Wisconsin. So, this is going to be. Don't sleep on this one. You want to get involved.
Yes.
And now with with early voting being easy, get down to your town clerk's office and get your ballot done, and then you can go on vacation.
Yep. And all the candidates have very good websites, so you can learn about their platforms. You can learn about their thoughts on things. 7 Days has done a lot of coverage. VT Digger's done a lot of coverage. The Commons, the Reformer. Yes, take to the Google and find out as much information on the gubernatorial candidates as you can. Randy and I have to go to break, but we shall return in a moment. We are back, and this is Green Mountain Mornings here on 100.3 FM, AM 1490, 38 minutes past the top of the hour. Hey, Randy Holhut from the Commons.
Hey, Olga Peters from Green Mountain Mornings.
Thank you for cheering me up in the first part of this hour, because we actually have some very unhappy, yucky things to deal with in this country, but I needed a little pick-me-up before I could talk about them.
Yes.
So take it away, Randy.
No, I'm just thinking of in the whole argument about civility and people getting vapors over the restaurant that told Sarah Huckabee Sanders to go take a hike. Mm-hmm. But they gave her a free cheese plate as a parting gift.
I think that's brilliant, actually. Should have given her some
but
wine with
the
it, too.
idea that, how dare people use people who don't have any power over the folks in government dare to raise their voices and say in a public place like a restaurant or something, like having the Homeland Security folks eat in a Mexican restaurant after a hard day of destroying families, and not expect to get jeered and catcalled.
Yes, although I have to push back on you a little bit. Like, while I don't think the Huckabee Sanders getting kicked out of the restaurant is a huge show of incivility. At the same time, yesterday we had that shooting at the Capitol Gazette. If we keep eroding our standards of behavior in public, isn't that shooting kind of where things are headed?
Well, yes, but the fear was yesterday before we found out that the alleged shooter in Annapolis was just a beef over coverage of his day in court. Mm-hmm. There was a fear that something else was going on. Mm-hmm. The name Milo Yiannopoulos is kind of notorious on the alt-right as someone who likes to start fights and then, of course, leave the room when the fighting starts.
Yeah, it just likes to stir things up and then book it.
So in his case, he was commenting that to a reporter from the New York Observer earlier in the week, "I can't wait for the vigilante squads to start gunning down journalists on site." Mm-hmm. This is Yiannopoulos texting the New York Observer reporter. Mm-hmm. When that reporter required further, Yiannopoulos said that he just simply issued his standard request for a comment. But Yiannopoulos, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, mm-hmm. our friends who keep track of all things Nazi,
yes,
that he was dead serious. And, of course, the Nazis really loved that comment. Mm-hmm. We had one of the groups saying, great. And, the editor of the Daily Stormer, Andrew Anglin, it's a neo-Nazi newsletter,
yes, saying
killing journalists is an awesome position to promote. That's Anglin's quote. Mm-hmm. That's a sentiment I can get behind. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like the jerks you saw at some of the Trump rallies during the election that wore T-shirts saying, "Rope tree journalists, some assembly required."
Yeah. Well, because, if you can take out the person who's going to hold you accountable, then you're not going to be held accountable.
And, I've realized, after all these years of doing this job, that sometimes people are going to get in your face and not and object about what things you write. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they have a reason to, because you messed up the story. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they just don't want to take responsibility for their own behavior. Mm-hmm. But the main thing is our position, our jobs, are jobs that are protected under the First Amendment of our Constitution. Mm-hmm. They're not. I can't think of any other professions. Maybe postal carrier, because the post office gets a shout out in the Constitution.
Okay.
They're constitutionally protected. Mm-hmm. What we do.
Yes.
And we're there as the people's representatives at meetings and all sorts of public events, big and small. Mm-hmm. We're the conduit for information going both ways, upwards and downwards. Mm-hmm. It's a really important responsibility. We take it seriously, and we take what happened in Maryland. I take personally. Mm-hmm. I take it personally whenever any journalist ends up being another name on the museum wall down in Washington.
Yeah.
The wall of those killed in action.
Yeah.
There's too many names on that wall that have been come up in the last few years of people killed for doing their job. This is too important a profession to to think that you can silence us with threats, intimidations, and murder.
Mm-hmm. Censorship through intimidation, censorship through violence.
Well, especially censorship through violence. And to all those who think they can, who are within the sound of our voices, think again.
Well, and here's it's you and I can be very cavalier about this, Randy. And I know we have been at times when people have, as you said, gotten in our faces, but made physical or verbal threats to us or members of the Commons. But here's the thing, folks, I want to remind people, and I did this a little bit in the 7 o'clock hour, but Randy said, the press is the representative of the people, and Jim Kondo, Secretary of State for Vermont, has said the same thing. And he says, what you do to the press, how you treat the press, he was talking to lawmakers, is how you treat your constituents. That's how you treat your community. And so I don't think we should understate how the actions yesterday of that gentleman in Maryland, that has ripple effects for the entire community. I mean, that is, it may not be as heartbreaking as a school shooting, but that is the community hurting itself. And
especially since looking at the biographies of the people who were killed yesterday, they were nearly all of them were veterans of the paper. People have been there for 20, 30 years. So they were part of the community.
Right.
A deep part of the community. And, you wonder about the depth of somebody's anger to want to do something like that. Mm-hmm. And for up here, we just think of the Carl Draga shootings back in the 80s. The one guy who shot up the little newspaper up in Colebrook, New Hampshire.
I'd forgotten about that, but yes.
But that was the same thing: a beef, a gun, and a lot of people dead. Mm-hmm. And so it happens. I mean, we do live with live with that threat. I'm not about to go buy body armor anytime soon.
Right.
But this is it's hard to really express in words about the anger I feel over seeing things like this, and the it's kind of a tradition in journalism that if someone can't file their story for one reason or other, they're prevented from filing their story, that their colleagues do it for them. Mm-hmm. I think of the story of Dan Bowles for the Arizona Republic. He was the reporter that was investigating a corruption case and then was killed in a car bombing. Mm-hmm. And how his colleagues from the competing media outlets completed the story. Mm-hmm. And that was actually the impetus for founding the Investigative Reporters and Editors organization.
Yes, a very good, strong organization.
Yeah, but that was why. Mm-hmm. I mean, that stuff doesn't just happen in third world countries.
Right.
It's happened here when the powerful want to silence a journalist. Mm-hmm. And it may seem like an abstraction because we're all kind of we joke all the time about people saying the Commons, I love that paper, and how much of unconditional love we've gotten over the years from our readers, and mm-hmm. we've been really buoyed by that goodwill these years through all our various crises and trials and tribulations. That we know how much you folks like the paper, and we appreciate that. Mm-hmm. But we also know that there's always going to be someone who might not agree with us and who will get in our face. I'm expected that it'll be solved like civil, with in a way that's civil and doesn't involve gunfire.
Mm-hmm.
But like you were saying, that the standards are going down.
Yeah.
And that's a concern, something that the whole nation should be concerned about.
What, and what do you think is the solution here?
It's hard to say because you're talking about a level of polarization that the last time that the nation was this polarized.
Yeah.
There was civil war, and 500,000 Americans died.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I think what so many folks don't understand, and I get frustrated in this recent budget standoff, I think is a good example. We think that power, Trump definitely does, and I think Scott tried to exert power this way through kind of brinkmanship and standing your ground and sticking your stake in the soil and all that sort of thing. But here's the thing. If I was writing a Hollywood movie and I wanted that nail-biting, down-to-the-wire tension, I would totally have written a scene like the budget standoff that we just had in Vermont. The deadline's looming and will people lose their funding and all these things. It makes great drama, but it doesn't make great politics, and it doesn't make great policy, and it doesn't make for a great democracy.
Doesn't even make a great West Wing episode.
Exactly. It would make an awesome West Wing episode, but guess what? We want democracy to be boring, actually.
Yes. Boring is good.
That's when it does its best work.
Well, we have the 4th of July on Wednesday.
Yes.
Perhaps we all take a minute and think about what America is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the idea of America is a strong one. I still believe in it very much.
Mm-hmm.
And come along, too, if you believe.
We have just about a minute left, Randy. So what do you think makes America great?
What makes America great is possibility.
Mm-hmm.
The possibility, your family, my family, a lot of families who came to this country with nothing and got a chance to build their lives. The chance for anyone to realize who they should be.
Mm-hmm.
That life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness aren't empty words.
Right.
They're the very fabric of our nation. And I get really mad when people try to interfere with those things.
I feel what makes America great, in no particular order, is the First Amendment, our diversity, and our optimism.
Correct.
And on that note, everyone, have a good weekend.